Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this edition of New York Female Leadership Stories. It's a real pleasure to have you all join us. For this session. Um, so yes, my name is Cyril Aweri from Trusted Advisors Group. So Trusted Advisors Group is a consulting firm with a presence in Dubai, London, and Casablanca. So we have 225 plus clients located in 25 countries, and we are continuing to grow. And So, Trusted Advice Group is, as part of our corporate social responsibility, we are having these series for women leaders, and the aim for these series is really to help to inspire women, generally, to becoming better leaders. So, for tonight's session, or this evening, this morning, this afternoon session, wherever you are, we are very privileged to have some amazing female leaders based out in the US. So this is our New York edition. By the way, we did have a similar webinar a few weeks ago for our UAE geographical location, which was a great success. We had hundreds of participants join us, and this is being streamed live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and then YouTube. Okay. So yes, so we have four speakers lined up for this session. We have Jenny Ma, Susie Ross, Fadwa Brora, and Amanda Neshiwa. So we are obviously going to invite them to share with us their stories, give some insights, which hopefully our audience, which we hope lots of them are women, of course, would be able to take something from it. So we're going to kick off without further ado and invite Jenny Ma to start with us. Hello, Jenny.
Hello, Cyril.
How are you?
So wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Likewise, yes. Apologies for the background noise there. So Jenny Ma is a global advisor for New York City real estate. Very, 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 very passionate as well about some other sort of NGO activities. But I'm going to invite Jenny to give us a quick intro of herself, and then we'll get to find out more about Jenny's stories. So over to you, Jenny.
Fantastic, Cyril. How much time
Yeah.
do I have?
You have about 5 minutes, Jenny.
Oh, okay, great. So I hope I
Yes,
won't bore everyone for these 5 minutes.
I'm
First of
sure not.
all, it's I want to say that this is an interesting day. We're doing this because our company was just saying that, oh, today is the Women's Equality Day. Then I thought,
Ah,
wow, how
okay,
amazing is that I am
coincidental.
doing this talk today.
Yes,
And,
yes.
you know,
Good,
it is
good.
an honor to be
Sure.
here to share my stories. So, first of all, I'm based in New York City. I've been
Yeah.
here for 23 years. I was born in Hong Kong. I'm half Filipino. I came to New York 23 years ago with a job. And at that time, I was in a fashion industry. So I was in the fashion industry for 16 years. The first 8 years was with family business. Then the latter 7 years, I worked for a international French magazine, and yeah. And so what is interesting is that first of all, about my background, I'm half Chinese and half Filipino.
Mm.
Was born in Hong Kong, lived in the Philippines for 6 years during childhood, And then I
Mm.
went to a British Army school, high school. So I grew up with the British. So I was like pretty much like in, exposed to a world of different culture already as
Mm.
a young child. And as I am growing up, I'm just kind of like realizing how interesting my life path is. And then now I'm in United States.
Right. Awesome. Awesome. That's
Yeah,
really great.
yeah,
That's a very, very interesting background there. So your different cultures as well is obviously, um, helping you to become the person you are, I believe.
absolutely. It's really
Yes.
shaped me up to who I am today.
Right. Right.
And so I grew up being passionate with fashion. I remember, I guess it was an influence. I remember I was a very shy child as a
Mm.
young girl in the Philippines. And one day I was in our sewing class, and I was probably 10 years old. And somehow, just the way that the sewing teacher came up to me, just showing me what to do at that moment, it like left a real big imprint in me.
Mm. Mm.
And so ever since then, I never really played dolls growing up, but then I started making, it gave me a focus. I started making clothes for my doll. And interestingly, then when I went to back to Hong Kong and attended a high school in this British school, I excelled in sewing. And then, at the school, when there's like a play or costumes made, I would be one of the first students to be approached by my teachers.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
That's
So anyway,
great.
so fast forward,
Mm.
and I got interested in fashion,
Mm.
and my first career was unplanned when I started in fashion. And when I was 19, I joined our family business. But already at that time, or I already knew that having my own fashion brand was going to take a lot of funding. And I knew at that time we didn't have this kind of funding. So I
Right.
ended up learning the ropes in the fashion industry. So the first 8 years
Mm.
was with my family. Then when I finally subsequently left family business after being a graphic designer, I also did advertising. I helped revamp the retail stores. And after
Mm.
that, I got a job with Elle Magazine. And at that
Right.
time in Asia, Elle Magazine had a very, very large licensing business. So it
Mm.
was just fitting that they were looking for somebody at that time. And this was like in the early 90s. And I had the profile, I had all the experiences. And from
Mm.
there on, it was just a very fortunate path for me. I started traveling 30% of our time from when I was in Asia, from Hong Kong to Australia, New Zealand, and Japan. And
Wow.
my territory at that time was in Southeast Asia. So I
Mm.
think having mentioned about my upbringing being half Chinese, half Filipino, and
Mm.
going to a school, British school, I think that kind of like gave me a sense of a worldly mindset. And
Mhm.
then it just like the doors just opened up for me
Awesome.
on that. Yeah.
Great. That's really, really great. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we'll be talking a lot about, culture, together. So I'm sure your
Yeah.
insights will become really, really useful for our audience. So that's yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that with us, Jenny. I think
Sure.
I'm sure our conversations will become even more interesting as we go through this
Yes.
session.
Yes. Then we'll talk
Great.
about my real estate in New York City right after this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you very much,
Thank
Jenny.
you.
Right, so let's invite our second speaker, Susie Ross. Um, awesome. Right, how are you doing, Susie? Oh, I think you're on mute, by the way. It's always
There we go.
that's
How are
better.
you?
Yes, very good, very good. It's
Good.
really wonderful to have you with us on this session. Really grateful, for you to make the time. Um, so yeah, Susie, you're a family woman, right? You have
Yes, I
some
am.
children, from what I gather. So that's a kind of an interesting kind different scenario there. Tell us about yourself, Susie, please.
Sure. And thanks again for inviting me. I think this is a really fun opportunity to talk about women. I have had a really interesting career path. I'm going to probably focus on the fact that I'm a career changer, a relatively new one too. But my biggest pride and joy is really my two grown children who've had an impact on me in probably very typical ways for moms, I suppose. But I always say, and it's a very weird thing to say, but if I die today, I will have felt that I've done my job. So they're good.
Great.
But then this career change is all about me, finally.
Yes.
But so I was raised in a split between New York's Hudson Valley and Miami Beach. And so I have a lot of I think a lot of things that have made such an impression on me are from these two worlds on the East Coast that are very different. But my career path is kind of what I really wanted to focus on. And I'm not sure that there's a typical career trajectory path. And I wouldn't necessarily advise my path for anyone. What I would advise is that you treat every job along the way with respect to build your reputation in whatever it is you're in. And I have some lessons learned about that, and I'll get to that in a moment. But first, I wanted to kind of begin with college. Because I didn't really have a passion for anything in life. And when I went to college, I really didn't have anything going in, and so I did something my father thought I'd be really good at. And I started to pursue a degree in architecture. And he sadly passed away in my first year. And aside from really being sad about my dad, it was tough.
Difficult,
But I also hated architecture. And so I knew that he wouldn't want me to be unhappy. So I added classes as quickly as possible and dropped all my architecture classes. And the fastest way to add classes was to go to the college right next to the one that was next to architecture. And that is how I ended up in advertising and communications.
That's very, very different too, right?
Somewhat. And also not necessarily the way you kind of go about creating a career. But I ended up liking it more. And so I thought I'd be happy. And I was. I worked my way around different facets of the advertising and communications industry for over a decade. And then shortly after my first child was born, I started really thinking about the world differently. And I felt some connection to the environment that really tugged at me. And I even looked into changing my career over 20 years ago. But at the time, being an environmental advocate was not very an affordable thing to do. And I really couldn't make it work and support my growing family. So I put my needs aside and continued to do what I was doing. And another decade really passed before I was diagnosed with cancer. And that kind of brought me back to the perspective about what's important in life. And actually, cancer was an incredible gift for me because it really allowed me to make time for myself, which a lot of women do not do because they're very caught up in the responsibilities that they feel and women tend to be more responsible for the home and for taking care of their family and sometimes for holding a job and making sure that everything is stable. And so that was me. And while I was focusing on my treatment, I also started spending a little bit of time kind of inching into environmental advocacy by doing volunteer work within my community. And when a call for community member participation came in to write a climate action plan, by the way, I knew nothing about it other than I wanted to be part of this community and I wanted to make a bigger impact. That was really the beginning of a long career in volunteering and doing pro bono work using the business skills I developed over the years in the business world. So I began to expand my network of people that were doing things I admired. And then 2 years ago, I finally threw the towel in and went back to school for a master's degree, which I completed just this summer in climate science and policy.
Wow! Congratulations.
So, yeah, it's been a long haul, but I have I am really excited for the future. But the piece of advice, and I know we'll have time to talk about this, just because I don't want people to go, oh my God, what's she talking about? She's like, don't do this. But what I would really love to share with people is that be patient if you haven't figured out what your passion is, and while you're at it, make the work that you do meaningful by doing the best that you can at the job you're in, so you can be relied on and trusted, and you can build that brand of yourself with that can-do attitude. So it's something you can be proud of every day.
Right. Awesome. That's a very, very interesting perspective there, Susie. Thank you for sharing that. It's kind of it's rather deep, right? So yeah, really, really awesome. And we'll be talking more about that when we have this kind of collective conversation as well. Awesome. Thank you, Susie. So now let's invite our next speaker, Fadwa Brewer.
Hi, sir.
Hi, Fadwa. How are you?
Hey.
Good. You can hear okay. You say something just to make sure we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Good. Right,
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
Just making sure. Yeah. So thank you very much for joining us, Fadwa. Thank you very much for taking the time to share your stories and insights from your perspective. So I'm going to leave you to introduce yourself to our audience. And just share some nuggets of inspiration, from your perspective.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me today. This is such a great opportunity to connect with other people. So I haven't done this in a long time, and I feel like I got the source of my experience, and I'd love to share with other female professionals. And so my name is Fadwa Brewer, and I was born and raised in Morocco. Well, I've done my studies in Morocco till my master's degree, and I worked like 6 years as programs and grants manager for nonprofits before I make the pivot, basically career changer. And I came to New York 2 years ago in order to pursue another master's degree in environmental science and policy. Along with Susie, so we're colleagues.
Wow.
And so my journey started back in Morocco when I was doing my first master's degree in business law. So I was kind of preparing myself to be a lawyer.
Yes.
And in parallel, I got involved in climate advocacy networks. I was always, curious about climate change when nobody was talking about, and I was like looking online and was trying to understand what is the situation. And so I strongly believe that there is a fundamental issue that we are still overlooking as a society, although we're still in the front lines of climate change. Coming from a Mediterranean region, one of the most impacted region, like climate change and climate stressors. So my goal was, along with other environmentalists, when I was in my doing my first master's degree back home, was to build a movement of young people who are educated and aware of those climate stressors and who can take actions in a way that sustainably serves grassroots communities. So I kind of was really, when I had a chance to get involved with those networks and learn about climate change, I understood the importance of bringing those networks to Morocco and to do fundamental work and creating this awareness and putting young people in the heart of climate protection, which was actually quite challenging because back in time, we're just people were laughing when we talk about climate change. It's like, this is not an important issue in a society that has some
socioeconomic. Yes, of course.
It was quite challenging to make, to make the connection in a more publicly understandable language, that all these issues are connected. So basically I shaped my career goals around what I'm more passionate about. So I knew that I want to be a climate professional. I want to do it in my professional career, which is why when I got my first master's degree, I worked. I started off my career as climate project manager for an international German political foundation, where I got to work closely with different stakeholders on a daily basis in the energy and climate space in Morocco and North Africa as well. So it struck me how important the clean energy transition, especially in a country where, we have a lot of natural resources and we have an increase in demand for energy, and to meet, our also in a fast growing society. So, but our ability to remain sustainable and preserve those natural resources and use the best of it while shifting renewable energy resources, energy was a big question mark for me. And I knew that I really want to build a kind of a more in-depth expertise on how to enable these low carbon solutions and clean energy transition in a way that put communities in the core of it.
Right. Awesome.
So but again, as a person who's always, I always step out from my comfort zones to learn something else. So after I worked for this client, Green Foundation, I served as a head of education departments in large nonprofits. And for 4 years, I worked closely with ESG, like companies who have ESG funds. And then I learned that we really have some, there's a lot of things to do in the sustainability work, how companies are trying to shift their business models and what kind of expertise and experience we need. It's kind of, during my career pathway, I was kind of, it was a learning process. But at the same time, I was trying to shape my long-term career around an expertise that really will serve my community and my country.
Great.
And so when everybody was expecting me to settle down, get married, and because I have a job, I have, kind of stable life, again, I stepped out from my comfort zone. And that's why I'm repeating this, because I believe, especially in a country like where I come from, women always were kind of not forced, but kind of more encouraged to be in a comfort zone. So although in order to create a leadership, and in a society where women were rarely given those leadership roles, we really have to also be able to step out from our stable life sometimes and comfort zone in order to learn. Again, that was my decision back in 2019, that when I got back to college and have him, do a kind of master's degree in environmental policies, but also in energy, in a way that I can also start off this career in the renewable energy world. So I came to New York in 2019, and I've done this master's degree, and I had a chance to serve in different 2 renewable energy companies, where I learned, about how in a very complicated market, very decentralized and highly competitive, how we still can succeed in a renewable energy transition. So since the last 2 years, I'm really putting all this effort in order to learn, to gain this knowledge and skill set on what is needed in my country in order to succeed the clean energy transition, in order also to enable communities altogether to foster this change. So I'm still looking, to build more expertise and to go back home with the necessary knowledge, and serve, my community and climate in climate.
Great, great, excellent. Yes, like I think it's very clear that you're very, very passionate about environmental topics, and it just so happens to be one of the top global topics for of discussion nowadays. So I'm sure you're in a very, very good place, and
Right.
yeah, it's great to share those insights with us, and hopefully we'll have some of our audience who happen to be interested in this area, and then of course it'd be great, for you to be a point of contact for that. So thank you very much, Fadwa, for sharing your insights there. So next we have Amanda, who's our fourth and final speaker. Hello, Amanda. How are you?
Hello, good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, good, good. So yes, thank you very much for taking the time to join us, Amanda. Yeah, I will leave you to introduce yourself and give us some quick insights of some stories from your side, please.
Okay. Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me. It's been so interesting hearing from everyone else so far, and there's a lot of parallels in everyone's story so far and mine. I think you'll notice.
Yes.
So I am the Deputy Director of Sustainability and Community Outreach for the Hudson County Improvement Authority. Hudson County is made up of 12 towns that are in New Jersey, and we're right across the river from Manhattan. Nowadays, every large corporation and major city has someone that's responsible for developing sustainability goals and initiatives. But 12 years ago, when I first started my journey into finding a career that I loved, that wasn't around, actually. In fact, I'm here in New Jersey, which is where I grew up. Out of the 550 municipalities, we had about 5 people that had a title where they were responsible for doing sustainability work in their town. So it was just really crazy, right? So, and actually the word sustainability back then was used a lot differently than it is now in the public and private sector. So that's really, I guess, makes me hopeful, I guess, that things are moving forward. But when I went to college, I enrolled to become an orthodontist because both my parents, they came from Amman, Jordan. And one of my parents has a high school diploma. They came to this country. I was the firstborn. And of course, they had high expectations and wanted me to be a doctor. That's really what they wanted.
Yes.
And so I really had no direction in life. And I agreed with their, sentiment and understood my responsibility here. And I enrolled in school to become a dentist. And it took a few semesters for me to realize that it was not for me and that it was not going to be something I wanted to do for the rest of my life.
Yes.
And so I started doing environmental activities on my campus. I started learning about sustainability and about climate change. And it was then that I understood that climate change is the biggest issue of our time, that future generations are going to be burdened with the inaction that is happening right now on climate. So, and because I was learning about the solutions in school to climate change, I felt a deep responsibility for doing anything that I can as an individual to make some of those solutions happen in my own community. So I was kind of nervous about what my family would say, so I changed my major without my family knowing. And I started going to rallies and protests and learning about going to trainings to learn about how to be a successful organizer and advocate for my own community, gaining a lot of female mentors, which was very important at this part of my career. And once I embraced this passion, a lot of doors opened for me to practice this new passion that I had. So I became a UN youth representative, where I got to learn about different cultures and perspectives around the world. I started working part-time for my own town as doing environmental work.
Yes.
And then when I graduated college, we had basically successfully put together a program from the ground up in sustainability. It was so successful. The residents loved it. And it was very natural for the mayor and council to create the very first position for me in their town as environmental director.
Okay.
Which is really
Great.
exciting. Yeah. And
Yes.
I did that for a few years. I went back to school and got my master's in sustainability management from Stevens Institute in Hoboken. Give them a shout out. And then about a year later, I got asked to step into this new role where I'm now working with 12 municipalities to develop sustainability goals.
Wonderful.
And
Great.
yeah, I mean, it's interesting because there's so many different lessons that comes from a story like this, I think. But
Right.
one that I'll impart now before we, I guess, dive into it more is the importance of trusting yourself. Trusting myself really was one of the most impactful things that I did for myself, and is I think where I am today, because years ago when I was looking for a career in this, so many people told me I wouldn't be able to afford it and that I wouldn't be able to find something. But I knew that if I was good at what I did, that I would find somewhere where someone would value that. And I'm really glad that I thought that, because I ended up being, I ended up in the right place.
Yes, awesome. That's really, really great, Amanda. I think what stuck out for me is the statement that you just made there about trusting yourself. That's really, and that's quite a challenging thing to do. Given your parents' expectations and you sort of changing course, right?
They're pretty happy now, by the way, I should say.
I'm sure they are. Yes, I'm sure they're very proud of you. Yeah, and that's a positive thing. So thank you very much, Amanda, for your insights there. So I think we can bring all our speakers together now, and let's have a kind of a joint conversation on some topics that are kind of related to that. So there was one theme that I could see there, ladies, and that is that you all started at a particular place expecting a specific kind of outcome. And then as you were going through your journey, you have to pivot and change course, right? So that's a very clear pattern there, even more so for, Susie and Fadwa as well, changing your careers completely, right? And I think that's a very important message, especially for our audience, that, when you, with life, nothing is actually that clear. You go through different steps, and then you have to make decisions as to which one to move to, etc. Right? So that's a really great pattern that I could see there, and the fact that what was going through your minds when you had to change direction, because that's quite a brave thing to do, isn't it? How do you overcome that? Is it fear? Is it do you just have this sense of courage? Is it a combination? How does that feel, for you guys? I'd like to get your thoughts on that, because I think that's what our audience can benefit from, because it's quite likely that some of our audience are exactly this place where they're saying, do I go left or do I go right? Right? What is it that they want to be doing or feeling in order to make this transition easy for them? I'll invite any of you. Okay, maybe I'll go with Susie first.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think fear is an incredible, I have fear all the time. I mean, I don't always know that I'm making the right decision, but I now have a science-based background. I've actually always had a science-based background, in some way. And I think what you have to do is just weigh. You always have to weigh. And especially if you're a mom or you're somebody who a family depends on, you always have to weigh the weight of how what you want is going to impact them. And that may delay your response or change your path. But it's a risk. But what I will say is that I don't know that I've ever chosen a path that I've regretted. I've always just hoped to learn and then just change the course if you need to. And otherwise you could be paralyzed with fear and never do anything. And I will say that everything that I have ever done that has been frightening I've always come out on the other side going, I'm so glad I did that. So I just take it as this is, that's the one thing I would say that we have to be a little bit more brave about doing, which is taking risks.
Sure. Calculated risks even.
Risks, but also
which is the weighing as you were describing.
Yeah, it's the way, but I also think it's how we all will evolve in this now ever-changing world that we're living in. And I don't mean I mean it from the climate perspective. But we all have to be a little bit more agile. So
that's the word I was looking for. I happen to be in that space myself, so very familiar with that. Awesome. Thank you, Susie. How about you, Jenny? How does that, from your perspective?
Yes, I've had many changes throughout my life.
Yes.
And when I look back, I always go back to telling my friends that what is important is is to follow your heart. Like all the ladies here today, like growing up, we never really had any direction. And I just, it's really what I'm passionate about that I just followed through. So when I joined my family business when I was 18 or 19, I made that decision and not go back to school because our father had passed away. And so my mother and our youngest brother and sister was left, and I was supposed to go either back to the UK or to Canada for college. And I just looked at them and I said, there's no way. I was being like this protector. I said, there's no way that I'm going to, to go back. And
very selfless of you.
And I knew school wasn't for me. It wasn't enough. I knew at that time, whatever I was studying in school, having business experience is far more productive for me. And then when I left family business, I didn't know what I wanted to do. But again, I knew there was something, again, it's always about following my heart. Then I got this incredible job. And what is important, which Susie said earlier, is patience. And that's one thing I wish I knew what it was. But I think as a woman and as a human being to evolve, we need to have life experience to really understand what patience really means. Right? So one day, 24 years ago, after I can't remember how many years now, over 10 years of being with the family as a rock with the family. And I felt that there has to be a bigger world out there that I can grow, that I can have a life for me and not about my family. But that never really changed, by the way. But then, so one day I woke up and I said to my boss, I flew to Paris. I was in Hong Kong, said to my boss, I practiced this line 100 times with friends. I need to leave Hong Kong and I'd like you to tell me where you need me anywhere in the world. It was nerve-wracking, but I did it. 8 months later, I was relocated to New York City without a college degree. And a lot of people, it's sometimes I understand education is really important, but what's more important is to following your heart, following what's important. Then fast forward, I left fashion shortly after, maybe about 3 or 4 years after that. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And at that time, my friends were saying to me, back home, back in Hong Kong, Jenny, you have 4 years of experience in fashion in New York, growing a business for North America, handling South America, and in all of these travels. You should go back. You might want to go back and to Hong Kong and consider, because China is booming, Shanghai is booming. Then I said to them, I said, well, I'm not happy living there. I left because I have a purpose. I needed to grow. I needed to understand the world. There has to be, because I've always, going back a little bit, and as a young teenager, I've always been curious about our human existence. What is my purpose? And so then fast forward, then I started real estate, and I didn't know why at that time. But 18 years later, as I go back to my childhood, everything about real estate is leading up to something bigger. And what I want to quickly share here is that I'm really grateful to be with this team of ladies, Amanda, Susie, and Fadwa, is because now I'm using my experience in life in the midst of developing a sustainable village, an eco village. And this is something, there's a lot of things that happened in between. But for me, I needed to, at this stage of my life, I needed to do something that's purposeful. What is it that I'm passionate about that I can contribute to humanity for my best and highest and for the best and highest of the people around, the citizens of the world.
That's yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, and then it always goes back to what I am passionate about, what means something that could be a contribution, to others. And my recommendation, and I want to suggest to all the female leaders out there, first, it's important to, like Susie said, be patient, but never give up with your passion. Never give up with your passion, because somewhere, as you keep plowing, as you keep doing what it is that you're doing day to day, what it is that you're interested in, read about it, do something about it, do something creative, so that it will, doing something creative is very healthy, because first of all, it will take your mind away from being obsessive about, when is this going to happen? When is this going to happen? Yeah. I think creativity is very important to every human, not just to women, but to men. And then just one day, as you keep believing your conviction, it will happen no matter what.
Great. No, that's really inspiring. Thank you, Janie. Thank you. So I keep hearing the word passion there, and the need, the importance of creativity, right? Okay, Fadwa, how about you? What is that like from your perspective, please?
Well, I think what I learned from this career shifting is two things. You never grow in your comfort zone.
Right.
You never learn determination if you don't fear the change. I mean, this fear turns into determination. And that's my own experience, because honestly, I didn't make the change within my country or within my region. I came from overseas. So it's like whole another culture. And I think Jenny relates. And a lot of challenges when I came here is I had no idea what's gonna, how this gonna turn. Like like, it's gonna be success, is it gonna be failure, is it gonna be what? Because you basically, when you decide to make the change, you sacrifice a lot of things that are already granted, but the only way we can grow and we can take more leadership roles within our societies is by really being afraid of these changes, like, turning this fear into determination, because it's a natural process. As human beings, when you're afraid, you just try to figure it out, because you're not your and my own experience, honestly, what I lived and what I experienced and what I learned in this 2 years period, probably I haven't learned it in my 28 years, I came here. That's actually, it's dense, and it's in terms of knowledge, culturally speaking, you see the world differently. You work in a different workforce, different culture. I came from a workforce that has certain cultures, certain, and you can, for example, work in New York, the most diverse society, or like the most, and the culture in the corporate world is very advanced. It has some challenges, but like you don't only build your, you don't only seek your goals, but also you build your character, you build your leadership skills, but also, and you become more determined about what you want. So that's actually the best thing about career changing, is if you grow fast and you know how to do it.
Yes.
Awesome. And actually, in the other aspect of life, when you learn, I personally, before I could panic about anything and just, being skeptical of taking certain actions. But now, honestly, I can take any action, like if there's anything I learn, is like any challenge, I'm ready to take it. And in the workforce, it becomes a skill set that you become really determined to overcome all challenges.
Good, good, good. Awesome, awesome. The general message there is feel the fear but jump anyway, right? That's really great. And how about you, Amanda? Just for a few minutes before we start inviting our audience for questions from our audience. Yes, how does that feel for you, Amanda?
Yeah, I would agree with everyone that's spoken so far because
Yeah.
that's exactly what I experienced is embracing the fear because it's never going to
Mhm.
go away. And sometimes the things that you're really afraid of are the things that you just really need to learn more about yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, awesome. And I think I know we were talking about culture there. Especially yourself, Amanda. You were talking about your parents having these specific expectations of you, and then of course you decided to take a different direction. But the good thing is that they are very happy with you now. So that's really great. How do we think culture is impacting women development? You know, um, does it depend on where you are in the world? I guess it varies depending different parts of the world where you're in. But what do you guys think about culture, national culture, and how that can impact women development? I'll leave this one open. Okay, Jenny wants to go
I want to
first.
say something about that.
Yeah,
So I was born in the 60s.
yeah,
So at that time in the 70s in Asia, the way that things are very different today. But what I
mm,
wanted to say ultimately first is that whatever that had happened that got us today, every single parent, women, even men, have lived through life in order for us as humans to evolve.
yes,
So, growing up being half Chinese and half Filipino, this is my personal experience. I
mm,
was born darker. And so
right,
my Chinese family would tease me and say I was dark and I was an ugly duckling. And then when I go to the Philippines, because
yeah,
I look Chinese to them, then they will
right,
tease me and calling me, like chinky. And so
right,
I've had to like experience that at a very young age. And then guess what? So when I went to the British school, I was wholly accepted. I felt
right.
whole. I was not being discriminated by my own race. And
Uh-huh.
so,
Okay, that's interesting.
fast forward, I
Yeah.
think, people make assumption and people tease in those days is because they are themselves afraid. And
Mm,
so sometimes when people don't really mean to, but there are just, not so nice people, but it's just a matter of their education. And
right.
it's just a matter of, how they are in their own world. And so
Yes.
for me, of course, it's damaged me a little bit and a lot of like, people, growing up with this issue. But I think and when I look back now, it's that I understand where the world
Mm,
was at in the past. And
yes.
so, how I
Yes.
can be today is that I have to understand and not just to forgive, but just, you don't forget, but you forgive yourself
Hmm.
and others, and also
Yeah.
be acceptance of what it was. Because
Yes.
what is amazing about United States, I think, being living here for 23 years and observing it, and I think United States America still has that power to be that change that will spread and ripple effect to the rest of the world. So your
Mm,
Me Too movement, for me at that time, it might sound a little silly for people, but you know what? That ripple effect is going to affect many other countries around the world, the underdeveloped world. Those are the people that we have to also care because they are the ones who don't have their voice. And so
right.
for me is to really recognize what we can be as leaders, as our own hero. We have to be our own hero first before we can be
Yes.
hero of others. We have
Hmm.
to have our own peace before we can talk about peace to other people. So
Mm,
I think it's important for us to recognize that. And also one
good.
last thing I want to contribute is that change is inevitable in life. And
Mm,
this is why we are today in our world, we are very fortunate to be experienced all of this.
yeah.
And in my path, as you know, in my path, I have seen that every several years I need a change. Outer circumstance would change it for me, but when I look back in my 30-odd year career, it's because I needed that change. I needed to grow so that, it's like, again, in life, until you have experienced it, when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, that's right, I made a good move, but it's not. It's because we ourselves need to evolve. We need to grow. And that's why change happens. And that's the way that I look at life.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, Jenny. So since we have some questions from our audience, let's try and bring that up on our screen. And let's address our most important stakeholders, who are, of course, our audience. So we have a question here from Umaima. What advice can you give to a woman in their 20s? And what things should be done before 30? Now, that's a very interesting one, right? Which of you would like to take this one then?
I think it's a Fadua.
I'd like to hear from Amanda.
Yeah.
Okay,
briefly, probably because that was my own experience and my own struggle for a decade from my 20s to 30s. The most, like, the biggest lesson that I learned is really you have to know what you would like to be in the future.
Right.
It's really determination, what I'd like to be, because I've experienced many things trying to find out who I'm trying to be, why I want to be in the future, where I see myself. Because at a certain point in your life, it doesn't become a priority, unfortunately, especially for people who have other, like, responsibilities, families, whatsoever, like just age, and you just want to chill, you don't want to figure it out. You need it to be already figured out. And I feel like determination, just ask, try to find out, because unfortunately especially when we graduate in our mid-20s, or like we want to have a job and get paid. Want the money. But unfortunately, when we're in the workforce, we discover that, oh my God, I don't feel like I want to do this on a daily basis. I don't want to wake up doing this for the rest of my life. And then for people who'd like to be comfortable in what they're doing, if they have courage enough to do the career change, they do it. But some others just get trapped in, some bad choices. So I prefer to not waste. I prefer really to be kind of slow down right after my first graduation. And decide what I want to be, what I want to do, because you can bring the money, but not the happiness and the fulfillment that come with. So that's why many people, including myself, I had the money, I had the stability, I had my apartments, my car, my comfort zone, but I had to give up on this because I was not feeling okay with where I was doing. I was not waking up every day motivated to be creative.
I think it's peer pressure as well, isn't it? Peer pressure is kind of the expectation is that you have your home, you have your car, all these things that you mentioned, right? So peer pressure is also playing a big role there.
And please do it before 30s. Try to find out what you'd like to be before, with all my respect to all experiences, but it's really important also to figure it out early if you have the good advice and time as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Amanda, you wanted to contribute to this question as well.
I'm in my early 30s, and I feel a responsibility to, especially for other younger women, to kind of, give them some nuggets of wisdom that I've learned along the way. And, things that I've done that I think have really helped me to get to where I am at 32 years old is, one, continue with your drive to learn more. Learning doesn't stop when you leave high school or college. Learn about as much as you possibly can, because learning about things around the world and people around the world really teaches you more about yourself. And gives you more confidence. The second thing is get mentors. I know I've said this like 3 times already, but having women in my life that I really admire, the way that they are, their friendships and how they are in their friendship. Maybe the way that they draft an email, whatever it is. Bring people around you that you really admire and want to be like, because you can learn a lot from them, I think. And then in your 20s is the time to really, get a habit to take care of yourself. Get into a really good routine. I would say, like, eating healthy, as healthy as you can, getting into meditation or some kind of getting into a mindset where it really foster creativity and will help you deal with the challenges of being a woman, actually.
And especially mind, body, and soul, right?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Those are things that I think are really important to build in your 20s, for sure.
Very, very true. Absolutely. Yeah, Susie, you would like to add?
I love what you said, Amanda. And actually, I never had a female mentor. And, I'm probably a little bit older than you, and the world wasn't so kind to women in the workforce then. So we were always kind of, we could find our way, but there wasn't a path, and there certainly wasn't very many mentors. Every woman was kind of, I wore a pantsuit for the first time to work, and people were like, and I was young, I was in my 20s, and everyone was wearing dresses and skirts. So I want to go back to what I said in the beginning, which is truth, which to me is, in your 20s, you don't know what patience is. Have it, find it. But also, this is also going to sound so corporate. Build your brand by being proud of the work that you do while you're trying to find out who you are, and don't give up trying to find out who you are. Not everybody knows what they want to do when they go to school or even after school. I didn't know what I wanted to do after school, and I didn't find it until I was in my 30s, and I didn't have the guts to do anything about it, and it wasn't the right time until I was in my 50s. So I'm not done learning. I'm not giving up. I am starting just another chapter. And so I think that this finality of feeling like you have to know everything in your 20s and you have to prepare in your 30s, in some places that might be the case, but we can rewrite. History doesn't have to repeat itself. We can really go back to thinking about what we want, and just, again, be patient, set some goals out there that are realistic. Don't ever give up. Don't let people discourage you. Find people that inspire you and make time for that. And God, what Amanda said, finding female mentors, self-care, so important. I learned that way too late in life. And I wish I had learned about it a little bit sooner.
This is really, really great. So the pattern that I'm seeing here is that the key nugget here is focus on building the right character, isn't it? So through your experience, who exactly are you becoming? And I think that seems to resonate with everything that you guys have said, and the fact that don't just follow peer pressure, all the external noise, right? But be determined. Fadwa used the word determination a lot. Jenny is talking about passion, right? So I think all of you are kind of giving out these key messages, which is around building the right character that's going to help you to, see through all the different challenges, etc. So this has been a really wonderful conversation, ladies. I certainly have enjoyed it. I hope that our audience have enjoyed it. We didn't get a lot of questions, but that's also a good sign. Perhaps everything that you have said has meant that there's no need for questions. So that's also a positive sign. Are there any other questions in the audience?
Just like there's another question.
Oh, we have one. Okay, right. So Umama's asking all the questions. She's very active this evening. So when you say a female mentor, what does really make a woman a mentor, and how to find one? Okay, so which one of you would like to take that? Susie?
I could do it based on what I've seen in the past. I'm sure Amanda could probably speak more to it as well. But finding somebody that you admire who perhaps might have gone out on a limb and can talk to you a little bit about how you might navigate certain situations. And it doesn't necessarily have to be it would be great if it's something in a field that you want to do. But it could just be a woman in business. It could just be somebody who you admire because they've done something that has gone beyond what you feel capable of.
Excellent. That's a very good piece of advice, actually. Yeah, it doesn't have to be in your specific area of specialization, right? It's just there's something in them that you may have seen that you really connect or resonate with.
For sure. I would even say, maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be a female mentor.
Right.
But I think that women navigate their lives and careers differently than men. And that's why I think it's important to get that kind of perspective.
Connection.
Right.
Yes. Very true. Yeah, there's a connection there, isn't there? Yeah. So just mindful of time, we could just talk for hours on this topic. We're kind of reaching the hour at this moment in time. One thing that I forgot to do as well was to ask if you guys are okay if we share your LinkedIn details with our audience. So that I'm sure some of our audience might want to reach out to you, outside of this session to continue the conversation, and hopefully you'll be able to make a positive impact on the lives of others. So we're going to be displaying the LinkedIn links for our speakers. You can this is for our audience. You can see that on the screen there. And I would also like to thank all of you, our speakers, Amanda, Jenny, Susie, Fadwa, for joining us for this very inspiring conversation. We would like to think that our audience have taken something from this. This is really the aim of the session. And hopefully there may be some stories coming out of this session, right, that we can even share on social media. And for you, our audience as well, it would be really great if you could visit the link that's been shared at the bottom there to get your feedback on how you think this session went. This would be really good for us as well. Right, so I think on that note we can conclude. So what would be, I'm just going to invite each of you to say one sentence as a piece of advice. From each of you. What will that sentence be? I'll go with Jenny first.
I'll stick with follow your heart.
Follow your heart. Great. Thank you, Jenny. And Fadwa?
Determination.
Determination.
And don't get stuck in your comfort zone.
Yes.
I know how it's so toxic.
Good. Thank you. And Susie?
God. I'm going to say go with just don't give up. Don't give up so easy.
Don't give up.
Got a whole lifetime to figure it out.
Great. Don't give up. And Amanda?
I'll say the importance of lifting others up.
The importance of lifting others. That's very great too. That's awesome. Right. So thank you very much again, all of you. Thank you very much, our audience, for listening and participating. And we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.